Big hello from Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing and More. I have a special guest today, Erika Heald, and she's the founder and the lead consultant at Erika Heald Marketing Consulting, where she helps a lot of SaaS startups and guess what? Specialty food companies plan and execute content strategy that drive business results. Hi, Erika.
Hello, it's so good to see you in your new house.
Yeah. I moved to Raleigh I would say 4 or 5 months ago, and we finally get situated. We still have quite a bit of furniture that have not arrived, but if nothing else, I have my desk, I have my chair. That's what counts. You and I kind of know thought leadership is very critical, especially for B2B marketing. So can you share with us in terms of what is the definition of thought leadership in the context of the B2B marketing specifically, and why is it important for marketers and the companies?
So for me, and this is coming from a background of journalism first and foremost, but I've also done my time, with a PR agency, heading up comms in-house, all sorts of that stuff too. For me, thought leadership is when you're putting those unique perspectives from leaders within your company out there in the public on a regular basis through various types of content. So it could be everything from blog posts to ebooks to public speaking engagements, podcasts, all of these different, avenues. But the key is people who are subject matter experts and having a point of view. And this is, for me, where I see the biggest kind of issues come up, because frequently, and not to disparage PR agencies, but frequently you will see thought leadership as a couple of slides in a PR presentation as, oh, hey, so for this month, here's the thought leadership. And it's, a couple of catchy headlines with your CEO's picture next to it. And it's like, well, that's all great, but they're not necessarily thought leadership. A lot of times they are just, they're tied into the PR campaign or what have you, but they're not really focused on that human being and their experiences and sharing them with people in a meaningful way. And from my perspective, you have to have that involvement with that thought leader and have that unique perspective and point of view that they're willing to share. If they're gonna just tell you everything that you already read in HBR that month, that is not gonna work, because people want something authentic and real.
So thought leadership, I think, just paraphrase what you just said, is much broader than just a couple of the tagline and on the presentation or associated, say, with the CEO or senior management. From your perspective, that the subject matter experts of a company, if they know specific topic or field very, very well, they can help other people to learn or provide some insights that, say, other companies or competitors cannot provide. That's also a sense of a thought leadership. Is that correct?
100%. You're so good at that. And
Thank you.
what I love that you glommed onto immediately was the fact that, thought leadership is not limited to your C-suite. If you're only putting your CEO out there or the other folks who sit on that same floor, if you have a physical headquarters anymore, realistically, some of your best thought leaders are going to be those folks with deep subject matter expertise that know a lot about your customers or who used to have jobs that are the same jobs that your ideal customers have. They're going to be those people who deeply feel the pain and the challenges that your customers have every day. Those folks are going to be fantastic thought leaders and have so much to offer out there. So I definitely encourage folks to look a little bit more widely at who could be part of their thought leadership programs.
Understood. So what is the biggest misconception about thought leadership? In addition, you just debunk one myth, which is, hey, thought leadership is just not about the C-suite. It can be about subject matter experts who know the specific topics or feel very well. What are some of the myths or the misconceptions out there?
The really big one is that you can hire an agency to create thought leadership for you.
A lot of companies do that.
Right. And, I get approached sometimes. People say, oh, I know you do ghostwriting and we want to have some thought leadership, program. I'm like, fantastic. So tell me about, your primary, thought leaders and, how do they like to work? What are their topics, et cetera. And then these folks look at me and kind of blink and say, oh, well, you would figure that out. And it's like, no.
I 100% agree with you. Yeah.
Maybe I can sit and interview them and ask them, but no, I'm not going to tell somebody what they're going to be a thought leader about. That you got to figure that out. And you have folks, some folks are great at writing, some folks hate writing and want to like leave you a voicemail. There are people who want to shoot you a quick video and show you some things. There are other folks who want to send you some slides or a doodle. It's like, it's so personal. And there's no way that you can just outsource thought leadership to another person. It's got to be that partnership with that subject matter expert and whoever's going to help with the content creation.
You brought a very good point. I ran into a similar issues. I mean, as you probably have known, that we've been friends for several years. I was at the corporate world for 20 years.
Yep.
And I did not like actively led the thought leadership program within the company I was at, but I worked very, very closely with the PR and also the business units that actually create that thought leadership program. And I do agree with you, having a vision, having a plan in terms of what the thought leadership program will look like, that's actually the client's job, not agency's job. They should actually know what kind of topics that they want to go after to actually have a point of view. It's not something that can be outsourced to agencies or anybody specifically. That part of ownership needs to be taken on actually on the client side. I 100% agree. I mean, if there are clients out there and say, oh my God, agency, you should figure that out. You at least have to provide some sort of guidance and a brief to actually help the agencies to figure that out.
And a half day of access to those thought leaders.
And also,
Totally.
yes, access the subject matter expert and be a conduit, right, between the agency and also subject matter expert to make things happen. I do agree with you on that one. That is actually, from my perspective, I also firmly believe that the client needs to take ownership on that, to figure out what they want to take a stand and also what fields they want to shine as a thought leader. So
exactly.
Cool. Very good. So now let's talk about, all right, the clients would take the ownership of crafting a thought leadership strategy. With that being said, where should they start? Where should they get started to craft that strategy for their company?
Well, I think you start by thinking about who in your organization is not afraid to speak their mind, even if it might ruffle some feathers. You want to find those people who are okay with sometimes being the one who says the not so popular opinion out loud in public and is willing to talk about it. Whereas you don't necessarily want to pick somebody who is really conflict adverse or who never engages with people commenting on their social, because we've all seen that. We've all seen folks who just reshare content and never engage. Those people don't make great thought leaders because inevitably someone's going to hate what they did and come at them. And if they don't respond at all, that is just, that is death to your program right there. Because you can't have it can't just seem like it's a one-way blast of information coming from a brand. It has to be an authentic human being who's willing to have a conversation. So to me, that's really the first thing, is to figure out who has those, interesting and controversial opinions and is willing to engage on them. Because also, what is your goal with them being a thought leader? It's presumably because you either want to learn more about your audience's needs, you want to get the interest of journalists, you want to give them, a wider platform to go and share their values and ideals that then support your brand promise. But again, if all they're doing is just kind of being very lukewarm, that's not really going to work. Or if they just really like being educational and teaching, then maybe you do something different with them. You've got to have that unique point of view and willingness to kind of, to throw down the gauntlet and be like, all right, I'm here and I'm ready. Who will stand up to me and let's have a debate?
That's actually very challenging, especially in big enterprise. A lot of things needs to be approved by PR and also legal teams.
And compliance.
I totally agree. So when you actually have so many people, like many people in the kitchen, and all of a sudden, once they get to like 3 rounds of approval, everything kind of get watered down. What is your thought on that?
When you know you're going to be creating some sort of content that really has that potential to be a little bit more controversial, so not just like a new approach to something, but something that's like really big. And, if you're talking to a publicly traded company and it's their executive, it could be really helpful to have somebody from legal or compliance that is supportive of you doing thought leadership. The people who have like the right regulatory certifications, have one of those people on the call with you. That way you can have that kind of real time caution or guidance up front while you're conducting your interview with the subject matter expert. So that way they can steer you away from things that could be problematic. Like, for example, I used to work at Charles Schwab and I worked very closely with legal and compliance. So my stuff would get through pretty quickly for review because I knew things like you don't use the word options.
You know what to do and what to say, what not to say.
Exactly. Like I knew which words were triggers. Like you don't use the word options because that's, you don't use by saying, oh, you have a lot of options for, where to do X, Y, or Z. Options needed to only be used as a word if you're talking about trading options, because that it was a whole nother chain of people to review and approve to then look at it and say, oh, well, that's not what you're talking about. But you know what? We hate something else in your content. And then you would just be going around in circles. So you've got to have that kind of input, I think, up front. And then it gets really, really smooth. And if you're really lucky, there'll be somebody on your client's team who can do some of that kind of pre-review and give you some of that coaching too.
Have a conversation with the PR and legal and the compliance team in advance. Understand kind of like their guardrail or the sandbox that you can play. And in general, within certain proper guidance, you still can steer or stir controversial topics, and it still can have a very meaningful conversation. I always feel like when you get PR, when you get legal, when you get compliance involved, the sandbox tend to be very small, and the topics that you can talk about tend to be very narrow, and you have to follow a specific script. What you are trying to say is you can somehow determine what that sandbox will look like, and possibly maybe you can also negotiate with your PR, legal, and also compliance teams, and kind of craft that sandbox in a way that you feel comfortable to have a conversation.
Exactly. Even things like compliance disclosures, there is always a little bit of wiggle room. I used to do what I called writing friendly disclosures at Schwab because I felt like I couldn't write, a paragraph and then have 3 paragraphs of disclosures. So I'd always try to think it through. Yeah. I was just like, oh no. So my friendly disclaimers, that always, and for me, what I took from that experience is if you're willing to put in the time with your legal and compliance partners and share, why you want to change something or where you're coming from, a lot of times they will figure out how to help you, get towards where you wanted to go. But it's all about having that, involving them up front versus sending something past them for a quick review. Don't ever do that. You will not get a quick review and they will not be your friend.
Exactly. I 100% agree. I always give them a heads up, and especially let them know, like I said, hey, in the next 2 days, I'm going to send this to you. So make sure that they allot time to review that. I 100% agree with you. Like, try to engage with them as early as possible. Another question I would like to ask is, how do you find the right thought leadership opportunities within the company? What are some of the low-hanging fruit that the marketers can explore to actually have a quick win on the thought leadership side? When they actually have a strategy in place, great. What are some of the low-hanging fruit that they can do to quickly to showcase the results?
Well, one of the really smart things to do is to figure out what are those industry associations or, or greater, both at the individual professional level and at the
Mhm.
larger corporate level that you're taking part of in already that you can get your thought leaders involved with. For example, a lot of brands are members of ANA, the Association of National Advertisers. But what a
Yeah.
lot of folks don't know is if you are an ANA member, they have all sorts of regional specialty subject matter groups. And they have amazing conversations on a quarterly basis or even more frequently, depending upon which region you're in. And those are a really good way to get your thought leaders' feet wet in a really positive, kind of low stakes environment. And I don't say low stakes because the content isn't valuable, but it's lower stakes because these are private conversations. They usually ask you not to tweet things, not to record things. So it's, you're in a safe group with your peers, but you're also making connections with other folks that you might want to interview for future thought leadership or collaborate with. So to me, it has a lot of really obvious, quick upsides without a lot of the scariness that can cause some folks to say, no, I definitely don't want to do public speaking. When in fact, if you give them a friendly environment to start in, you can quite frequently convince them to do more of it.
Yeah. So give them exposure, right? And what you are saying is basically find opportunities for them and make them comfortable in terms of public speaking or be in front of the crowd and build up their confidence. And then eventually they can be kind of like a brand ambassador or they can be a subject matter expert, very much public facing. So that's great in terms of low hanging fruit. What about like writing content? And a lot of subject matter experts, they don't like to write. Do you have any suggestion in terms of what they need to do?
Totally. I've had a lot of CEOs that I've worked with who 100% were not writers, and who also, on the flip side, 100% were thrilled to send out pieces I ghost wrote for them and,
Yeah.
say to everyone, oh, look at this piece I wrote, because they had that ownership and felt like it was, me inside of their head. And that's because I do a couple of different things that anybody can and should be doing. First of all, I try to get a couple of bullet points, and I mean sketchy 3-word bullet points
The
about
key points they
overall
want to.
super high level bullet points. I'm like, just tell me at a high level, what are you thinking? Or what was something you read that you want to write a response to? So just getting that kind of like super sketchy outline so then I can go away and do some research. And then I always want to do a conversation. From a process standpoint, it's like an intake call where I'm making sure that I understand their perspective, want to understand anything that they think that's a little bit different than other folks. So you do some interviewing. And so either doing that live as part of a conversation, like an hour-long conversation where I'll do intakes for multiple different topics. Or I had one CEO who liked to phone me whenever he was like stuck in the car.
Some ideas. It was like, you know what, Erika, you can write about this.
Exactly. And he would call and he would always tell me, put me into voicemail. And I would put him in my voicemail and he would talk to my voicemail. So I would have a recording of him, riffing off of something that he was thinking about. And then I would write it up and send it back. And we do, back and forth iteration. So it's really about figuring out, is your person a talker? Are they a scribbler? Like, do they want to draw you a picture and send it to you? Really understanding how they think and how they want to share things. Right now, I have a client who very much likes to use like mind mapping software. That's one of the products that they have. And he likes to kind of put it through and think it through that way. And so I always have him start by sending me a mind map. And it's fantastic. It's the best way to get started on something. But it's also just about whatever they're comfortable with that makes them feel like you will get what they're trying to do and that it won't take too much of their time.
Understood. So basically try to understand what are their preferences in terms of sharing content or sharing their knowledge. It doesn't matter if it's on the phone or mind mapping tool or just talk to you or they simply just want to scribble some ideas and share with you. Anything that they can do to get themselves to share their knowledge is a good starting point.
Exactly. And then, of course, I always ask whenever they're doing any kind of public speaking, though, I always ask them, even if it's just setting down their phone and hitting voice memo and recording, to always record that stuff. Because if you get a recording, you can go and get a transcript. And then all of a sudden, you have all of these maybe.
Can be a blog post too.
Yeah. You have all of these like one-off great ideas in exact turns of phrase that then help you make sure that you're writing in their voice. So I love that too.
Awesome. I have one last question. So thought leadership is a great idea, and for a lot of companies that if they want to differentiate themselves and also put such a unique lens in terms of who they are, having a thought leadership content, having a thought leadership position will definitely differentiate them. But there's such a long play, right? And if you want to do a thought leadership, it's not like, oh my God, I'm running a 3-month campaign. This is a long play. And a lot of marketers are hesitant to actually do it because you cannot show a quick results. Like you cannot demonstrate, it quantifies certain dollar of the pipeline opportunities, or you quantify how many leads that you have generated. So it does not have that direct tie to sales. And a lot of people tend to allocate the budget to do something that will show quick results. So how should they deal or position in terms of a thought leadership pitch to their management when the direct tie to the sales is not necessarily very clear?
For me, I think it's about figuring out, it's kind of, there's kind of like two different things. One is the figuring out how can you actually show some ROI from those specific things that they're going out there and sharing. And then the other one is understanding what opportunities you pick that have an intrinsic ROI. So for the first part, things that I've done successfully in order to have a direct ability to show ROI from speaking at an event are either having, doing a text response. So having a, text your email address to this, cell phone number, and them getting like a packet with like a workbook that goes along with the session. Or I've had it where it's like, here's a special bit.ly URL that if you go to this page and fill out a lead capture form, you get, this template. Or you have like a special code that you're only giving out in this session, or that you're only using in UTMs on a link in a blog post. So there are some things you can do to actually more accurately, and of course, no attribution is 100%. That's like a big thing everyone's arguing about now. It's like attribution is never 100%. Of course not.
Especially offline. If you do any kind of offline stuff, it's very hard to quantify online attribution.
Exactly. So, and of course you can give away swag too. And then when that swag starts turning up on social, or you see people wearing it or carrying it around, then that's another way that you can say there was some real ROI, because now this person who is, part of our target community, they're out there running around repping our brand. So we made a good impression. So those are the like kind of, to me, really easy ways of showing the ROI. Now, on the other side of it, you can also prioritize those places where, let's say, if you're talking about HR technology, probably your company, unless you have a huge budget, you're not going to have the money to take out a series of ads in SHRM's magazine. So if you're a startup, you're going to want to figure out, how can I get in front of that audience without spending, $100,000 a year with SHRM, right?
Huge amount of media dollars. Yeah.
Well, the way you do it is you come up with an amazing topic idea, and you partner with one of your customers who has a really good title in a really relevant industry, and you put in a speaking submission. And so then you're able to get in front of and be promoted to SHRM's entire membership across the United States. That is something where you can say that, hey, well, my session was promoted in X, Y, and Z ways. And so my name, our company name, and associating us with this topic, that's gone out to all of these people. And so I think if you are doing, making really strategic bets and strategic investments on trying to get out in front of those right audiences, then I think 100% you can have a more provable, concrete ROI for your thought leadership efforts.
I think the key takeaway from what you just said is whenever you create a thought leadership content and when you write a copy to promote that content, make sure you have a very specific call to action. It doesn't matter you are speaking at the events or you are promoting it on social media post as a social media post and actually have a very specific call to action that you can drive to. Doesn't matter if it's fill out the form or it's contact sales or download certain content pieces, but have a very specific call to action. And then the other one is if you are promoting it and make sure you document it, that if the content has been shared or been highlighted at a certain industry journals or a specific events or a certain media outlet, kind of take that and document it and share that to quantify in terms of, yes, some these content pieces or the events that you do or the activities that you do related to thought leadership actually have a certain kind of impact.
Exactly.
Cool.
I should hire you.
Thanks, Erika. That's so sweet.
I'll just take you around in my pocket and you can paraphrase me. I love it.
So, you know what? To end the show, I would like to ask you one more question. And this is kind of like a fun question usually. Ooh. So what shows are you binge watching right now?
I'm waiting for the Great British Bake Off to come back. And I feel like that should be.
Oh my God. Me too. That would be like season 12 or something. I love the Bake Off.
Me too.
I love that show.
And then of course, Top Chef. I always get really into Top Chef.
Hey, Erika, it's so wonderful to have you on my show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I hope to see you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Never miss an episode of B2B Marketing and More by following us here on YouTube and leave a comment while you're at it. You can also find episodes wherever you get your podcasts.